This is Briggate. It's one of the oldest streets in Leeds, dating back to 1207. It runs down to Leeds Bridge, which was the main way into the city, crossing over the River Aire. Now, early maps of the area show inn-yards and narrow alleyways branching off the street. Some of those inn-yards are still here, with the Angel, the Ship, Whitlocks and the Packhorse all still serving food and drink. And some of those narrow alleyways were covered over to make shopping arcades, and a number of those are still around. Leeds is famous for its shopping. Indeed, it's something of a shopping destination. The Rough Guide to Britain says that Leeds is the best place for shopping in the UK. And with more than 1,000 shops in the city centre, ranging from high-end luxury brands to high street names to small independent retailers, there's plenty to choose from. The shopping arcades started to appear at the end of the 19th century. And although some have closed over the years, a few remain, and with recent investment, they are now one of the most interesting parts of the Leeds retail landscape. This is Thornton's arcade. It was the first shopping arcade to be built in Leeds, and it was opened at the height of the Industrial Revolution in 1878. Shops provided a much-needed outlet for the new factories in the country, and demand for goods in turn spurred on further industrial development.
The arcade was named after its owner, Charles Thornton, who got permission to put up this arcade on the site of the Talbot Inn, which was one of the oldest pubs in Leeds. He also had a nearby music hall, which is now the Leeds City Varieties, and perhaps this explains the theatrical nature of the design.
It remains a grand statement of the optimism of the time, with its Gothic arches, its lancet windows on the upper stories, and just look at these dragons holding up the roof arches.
The arcade clock was made by Leeds clockmakers Potts and Sons with life-size figures from Sir Walter Scott's popular historical novel Ivanhoe. It shows Robin Hood and Friar Tuck, along with Richard the Lionheart and Gurth the Swineherd.
The arcade was refurbished in 1993 and is now home to a number of small specialist retailers. 11 years after Thornton opened his arcade, the parallel street became the Queen's Arcade, the second arcade in the city, with fashionable shopping replacing the rather uninteresting inn and yard that was on the site before.
Like the Thornton's arcade, it includes a roof supported on cast iron arches. It includes a gallery which allowed more shops and originally included a hotel as well as residential space on its upper floors. It is unique amongst the Leeds arcades to have a 4-storey frontage.
Some of the shops had kitchens and bedrooms above roof level so that the traders could live on site. Now, the gallery is no longer in use, but if you look carefully, you can see the top of the spiral access staircase at the Briggate end of the arcade. This arcade was designed by Edward Clark, a London architect, and it was named in honour of the 50th anniversary of Queen Victoria's accession to the throne. These days it's filled with a mix of high street brands and stores like Accent, which has been part of the independent retail scene in Leeds since 1984. This is the Grand Arcade. It was opened in 1897 with its glass roof, its open beams and its wonderful arched doorways for going in and coming out. It was built by the new Briggate Arcade Company and it originally consisted of 2 parallel rows of shops with a connecting corridor built in a sort of H shape. Now, one of the rows was closed off. If you look outside the building, you can see where it was originally. It became the Tower Cinema, and then later the famous Mr. Craig's nightclub, and it's now home to the Brotherhood.
The Grand Arcade prides itself on being home to small independent retailers and includes lots of specialist food and drink shops, including a great vegetarian cafe and a traditional tea room. some places to keep you looking beautiful, and some fabulous niche retailers too.
There's a wonderful clock in the Grand Arcade which was installed just 2 years after the arcade opened, and it was also built by William Potts. It features knights in armour striking the bells, and then a succession of characters that come out and bow on the hour: an English guardsman, a Scotsman, an Irishman, a Canadian and an Indian. The last of the Victorian and Edwardian arcades to be built was the best. Built in 1900, the County Arcade is the most lavish of all of them. It was designed by theatre architect Frank Matcham, who built the London Palladium and also designed a couple of hundred other theatres around the country. It replaced slaughterhouses, butchers' shops and slums, and was a big part of redeveloping the area between Briggate and Vicar Lane, where Leeds Market was sited. This and its sister, the Cross Arcade, were built either side of the Empire Theatre. Now, the Empire was a music hall which seated 1,750 people and was a place where the biggest stars of the day performed, such as Charlie Chaplin, and it was said to be one of the finest in the country. It later became used as a cinema before being demolished along with much of the Cross Arcade in 1962. Now, that site became another shopping arcade, the Empire Arcade, which was home to the legendary 1980s clothing shop Other Clothes, before being redeveloped again as a site for Harvey Nichols. The site behind me was once the Mecca Locarno Ballroom, which was open here from 1938 to 1969. And it was a place where you could dance to live music. People would come in their lunch hour for a dance before going back to work. It was managed by one Jimmy Savile, a famous son the city of Leeds would surely like to forget about. The arcade was also home to the Dolls Hospital, also known as Smart & Sons Toy Shop. And this was a place where you could bring teddy bears and dolls to be given a new lease of life. And that's an absolutely great idea. Somebody should do that today. But over time, this arcade and the surrounding area fell into disrepair, with the shine well and truly rubbed off its Edwardian splendour. Many years later, renovation began throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Now, one shop was found to be intact, and that was used as the template for the mahogany frames, the curved windows, and the signage used throughout the area. Queen Victoria Street, the street adjacent to the County Arcade, had been a pedestrian precinct for some time.
As part of the redevelopment of this area, it was given a stained glass roof. At 8,000 square feet, it is Britain's largest stained glass commission anywhere, and is by artist Brian Clark, who has been described as the rock star of stained glass windows.
This immediately transformed the street into a new shopping arcade, with the County Arcade on one side and King Edward Street on the other side. The Victoria Quarter is now home to some of the most exclusive shops in Leeds, including Vivienne Westwood and Louis Vuitton. It's a pity that not all of the Victorian and Edwardian arcades have survived, but those that have are fortunate to have been invested in and really are now the jewel in the retail crown of the city. But look just beneath the surface and you can often see what was here before. This doorway to Harvey Nichols, for example, used to be the stage door to the Empire Theatre. Just look at the sign above it, something that most people visiting this store won't realise. Leeds is fortunate to have these superlative shopping arcades, but understanding just how they came to be here is just as interesting. This is Jonathan Straight for The Lowdown.